businessman, Ryan Rowe, who is the CEO of Central Indiana Economic Foundation. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
So I'll give you 2 seconds. I did this last year for the first time, so this should seem a little bit more rehearsed than last year's. You know, for a little bit ways of background, because people always want to know, you know, who I am and what I've done. So I was born in Marion General more years ago than I care to count. And I've lived in a lot of small towns. My father worked for the phone company, so I got a chance to see a lot of Indiana, some Michigan, some Detroit, some Texas, some Maryland, but I've lived in a lot of towns around you here, from Converse and Greentown and Attica, Kokomo, Crawfordsville, Muncie, Indy. I went to college in Bloomington at Indiana. I spent the first couple years of my life enjoying college. I spent the next 2 years of my life trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So for a lot of you who have signed up to participate in the business plan competition, you've done more at your age than I did probably before I got to college. I studied finance and accounting undergrad. I came out and worked for a consulting firm for a couple years called the Boston Consulting Group out of Chicago. They compete with people like McKinsey and others you may have heard of, like Arthur Andersen or Bain. I went back, got my MBA at Harvard, and then I went to New York, and I worked in Wall Street for about 17 years, and then came back, you know, here to Indiana with now my wife and 3 kids, and we now just go by CIE, but many of you know on State Road 18, the ag refiner we've got there. We process coarse grains, mostly corn and other grains, and we ferment them into alcohols. And we do a lot of different kind of alcohols, many of which that you probably don't even realize you use on a daily basis. So if you brushed your teeth this morning, your mouthwash, your perfume, your cologne, most of your makeups, your hand sanitizers, on and on and on, are all made with product alcohol that we make. It's a grain neutral spirit. So it's cool to call it moonshine, but it's an intermediate chemical. So we put together a business plan very much like we're going to go through today when we went out to raise money to kind of help the founders build what was a soybean field into the facility you see on State Road 18, and we've gone on to expand it now a couple of times over the last 4 or 5 years. So how many of you here have a family member, could be a mother, father, relative, who is a part of a small, like, independent business? Anybody? Right? So a lot of my relatives are still farmers. That's considered an independent business. Or drivers, truck drivers. I got a lot of my relatives are still state troopers, which helps me in northern Indiana when I'm speeding around Lafayette. But I had 3 cousins. One of my cousins used to be chief of police here in Marion before he went on to do some other things as an independent operator. And I think all of us who compare notes between working in large companies or working in small companies, there's a lot of things that you find in your business plan here in front of you that at first glance may not be self-apparent. You know, why are we talking about mission statements and visions and branding and all that kind of stuff? Why can't we just get into making money? But I've now been in a chance to be at CIE for a couple of years to figure out that there is kind of a method to the madness. So if you kind of commit to it and spend some time, I know it looks a little bit like Greek to you now, but the more time you spend with it, the more time you kind of commit with your teammates to being open to listening to each other's ideas, this stuff will start to come together, and frankly your first idea may not be your best idea, and you might choose to scrap everything you've done halfway through. That's okay too. There's been a lot of good stories of people over the years, people like Hershey's, we talked about last year. So Hershey's candy bar, that gentleman he filed for bankruptcy 9 times before he hit on kind of this idea of the chocolate bar that we all now know as kind of Hershey's, right? There's been a lot of stories of people like that who have kind of tried and failed and tried again before they hit on the thing that kind of makes sense for you guys. So as a team, if you don't come up with an idea right away, it's not a failure. And some of you will have personalities that are more kind of extroverted, more dominant, some people more introverted. It's not good or bad, but I think part of the lesson you just went through is also understanding kind of how you guys work together as a team. We've got 65 people at CIE. We used to have about 38. So we have a lot more people and personalities to manage. And I guarantee you, spend a little time listening to your teammates, and I think this makes this process kind of all go a lot smoother. How do I go forward? Outline. Is that right? So please ask questions. This process will go very, very quickly, much quicker than they would like it to go, unless you guys ask a few questions of me as we go along. And no question's a bad question, right? This is the first time many of you are putting together or thinking about a business plan, so no question is a bad question. We make the joke about a lemonade business. I was just driving around my neighborhood this past weekend and I saw a bunch of kids out there. The only difference now was I noticed that one of these kids, a little cocky, had like a square reader and they were taking credit cards, right, for a lemonade stand. A bunch of 7-year-olds, which is kind of scary. But what it says is there's a lot more technology today that people your age can actually participate in and have businesses and side interests, even in high school, that you probably couldn't have had before, right? The jobs available to me were, landscaping, working construction, which I did a couple of summers, until I really got to college and had a little bit of a degree started before I could really get into a corporate kind of internship promotion. Nowadays, with technology the way it's going, all of you have the ability, frankly, to be app developers, to have ideas, and really it's about finding a need that you're going to try to satisfy and then trying to find out whether you can actually, if there's demand for that need, right? In terms of success rates, right? Whether it be small businesses in general, 80% or so of employment. You saw and read about the statistics after the last financial crisis. We had an unemployment rate of about 10%. Most people in this country are employed by businesses that have like 25 people or less in the businesses, right? So if you think about your daily life, right, and it's not all about IBM and Facebook and really, really large companies. A lot of them are small franchisees, Subways, gas stations, things around your neighborhood is where most people are employed in this country. And the cumulative survival rate of most businesses over the first 4 or 5 years is actually more than half. Now in restaurants, it's actually worse than that. But what it says is there's a lot of businesses that get started every year, and many, many, many of them are successful. So I think some people always feel like, A, you don't have any money to start the business, B, why should I be so lucky to have such a good idea? But there's a lot of good ideas out there, and I think trying, right, and being able to take risk is a big part of starting a new business. What is this? Make lots of money is a good concept, but in a business plan, you've got to expand the idea a little bit. There's a lot of presentations I'm in where someone will spend a lot of time thinking about a business plan, and people want, especially bankers, will want to jump right to the back, and they'll want to look at the numbers. And that's a big part of what you guys will do, which is justification for the investments you're going to make in your businesses. But it's got to be more than just about the numbers. Money, and I always say, money kind of takes care of itself. If you've got a good product, you've got a good concept, you've got a good idea, people will come, people will buy, and you can find the price point at which you can make money. But a lot of people start their businesses thinking about making money, not about what the idea is. What are some questions you should ask, right? What's the niche, or what's the need my business will fulfill? Nowadays people think Facebook was an obvious thing, right? It wasn't 7 years ago. But there was a need in terms of social interaction and connectivity that didn't exist before, but there was a platform out there and had been out there since the early to mid 90s. It started with a company, Ameritech, right? Your local phone company started a business called WinGopher. And that was the very, very first World Wide Web way to get around what was the early architecture of the internet. And since that to today, no one had ever really kind of thought of the concept of something like Facebook. What products or services will satisfy it? Is my idea practical? Who's my competition? Is it unique? Can I deliver a better quality service? Can I create demand for my business? Sometimes people don't even know they need these apps and businesses and services until you come up with it and you can actually create it. So think about your lives, what you do on a day-to-day basis, be it at school, how you get to school, right? What you use at school, write on instruments. How do you keep and trade notes with classmates? Something we used to do at HBS. How do we share notes, right, in our study groups? Is how things like Dropbox, Box, used to be called Fat Drive once upon a time, went bankrupt because it was a great idea. It was just a little early. But this idea of being able to put things into the cloud and share them has been around for many, many years, but a lot of us really weren't there and didn't have the technology, the mobile technology, the phones that you guys carry, which my 7-year-old daughter just asked me when she gets her first phone, and I said it's many, many years away before she gets hers. But more and more, we're more and more connected. So that's where you're going to start. You got to think about the products you are. I'll actually skip this page and go to this one, which is a little more telling, right? So think about your day-to-day life, right? Once upon a time, there was just Adidas, or as they say in Europe, Adidas. And then Nike came along and created a running shoe that was specific to running. And now we've got a shoe literally for everything. I was just in the store and I saw they now have not just chilling shoes, they now have shoes for CrossFit. They have shoes, right, for specifically for soccer. They are trying to capitalize on the idea that you don't just have one pair of sneakers for everything. You have to have this specialization, and they're trying to pitch you on the idea that this is a niche that has scale, that has a rotation to it, right? Because every year you get new shoes, just about in these specialized things, and they can charge a different price point for it. What about the components of a business plan? You know, what differentiates one business plan from another is not necessarily completeness, but the fact that all these things kind of fit together. And I would tell you, most people start with the executive summary. I would ask you to set it aside and write that last, okay? Is one idea for you to take away from today. Don't try to write your executive summary first. Write your executive summary last. Because what the executive summary should be more than anything else is kind of a summary of your entire business plan. And I think some people try to write that first, and really it should write itself. Think about what's your business, what's your niche, what's the need, and how you're going to quantify that need, and really talk about your business and its description. What's core to your business? What's your mission statement? What are you going to try to accomplish? What's your competitive analysis? Are there other people out there supplying that service today? If it's a lawn care service, if it's bottled water, right? If it's babysitting, I just saw, care.com is this new, if you've seen this online, you can sign up and it's a babysitting service, right? There have been babysitters around for a long, long time, right? But these are people who do background checks on the people who come and see and watch your kids, and it's also a way to also pay. Uber has come out, right? We all have seen and talked about Uber. There's a reason why those guys pick the name Uber, right? Because they don't want to be just in the taxi business. There's a lot of things they could be in. They're actually going to partner with Amazon to deliver in less than 2 hours in Indianapolis any package you buy within a certain select group within 2 hours if you're a Prime member. And how are they going to get it there? They're not going to get there through FedEx or through U.S. Postal Service, but maybe through partnerships with people like Uber to be all things, right, that have to do with cars and delivery and basically kind of part-time labor. And all of you guys could be a part of that network. But who are you competing with? Who's your management team? Is it important that you have people who understand your product, or is your product so new that what you need are not specialists within an industry, but you need specialists within certain verticals, right? So I might understand finance, and you can put me in about any business you want to, and I probably can understand that element. I may not understand production operations. I may not understand logistics. I may not understand human resources. I may not understand marketing, sales strategy, but I understand finance. So when you think about your management teams and who needs to be a part of your team, think about what's critical to delivering the business statement and the business description and the mission statement that you have. Development, production, many of you won't have this, right? If you're a service business, you won't necessarily have a, quote, production. You won't make anything, as you guys were doing today on your teams in terms of making a tower, right? It might be a service you're providing. So in lieu of development and production, you might want to put in there human resources, right? So there's a lot of businesses out there like accounting firms, law firms, right? Those guys, they don't, I hate to say it, they don't really make anything, right? They're a service provider, but what they really are in the business of is attracting the best people, training them, and then retaining them. So they're a elevator business, right? Every day, their assets of their business get on an elevator and leave the business. And every morning you hope they come back. And when they don't, you gotta go replace them. Marketing plan, financial plan, and appendices. So the marketing plan is, how do you get the word out there, right? So all of us are emailed, right? We all get spam email, marketing things to us. We all see it. in commercials. You're now starting to get, whether you notice it or not, when you surf the web, you're getting banner advertisements, right? And as you start to be aware of these things and you start to answer and click through, those clicks are being tracked, right? Data companies, logistics companies, they are monitoring your email address, who you click through, every one of your pictures you take. You don't know it. If you don't, you should. It has got a geolocator embedded in that picture. So when you post that to Facebook, they know where you had lunch, they know where you shop, they know where you babysit, they know if you're off the floor, they know. A little scary, right, in some way, shape, or form. But people are able to then start to map out the architecture of your life. And if they know where you shop, they know maybe where you're eating, right? And they start to know your patterns, and they start to market specifically to you, and they parrot that back. And so you will both go to the same site, and you'll both be getting different banner ads. Those are different ways of marketing and advertising your preferences, your attributes to what you, as consumers, right? 2/3 of our economy we're a consumer-driven economy. People like China are investment-driven. People here in the United States is very consumer-driven. So understanding the 18 to 40-year-old demographic is the richest advertising population there is for ads during the Super Bowl to, Google and what they're doing. You need to have your own marketing plan. How will I get the word out? Will people understand my name of my business when we have it on a banner, or if it's in a high school program, or if it's in a billboard as I'm driving by? Will people in a car driving by this billboard understand who we are, what we're about, what we sell, and how do I go buy it, and where do I buy it? So your marketing plan is about how do you get the word out, how do you brand yourself, and how do you that's your first impression, right? Facings are your first impression with your consumers, and how you get people enticed to say, that's something I want to try. And part of that marketing plan might be couponing, right? A lot of people get people to try their products through coupons, right? Buy one, get one free, right? With something the grocery store chains and the consumer food package companies really got people addicted to, right? You think back to really famous marketing campaigns would be like Gillette, Procter & Gamble, right? They used to give away the razor for free to get you to try it. And they literally give it away for free, but then they get the razors, right, that you buy on a continuous basis because you can't find a better razor than that. So how do you get the word out, and how do you entice people to make the first purchase? The financial plan should be a summation of everything that comes above it. So what am I paying my management team? What's it cost to produce or develop my product? What's it going to cost me to advertise my products? And then how many do I expect to sell each year? Right? And most businesses will lose money in their first year. Very rarely do you find businesses make money out of the gates, right? If they did, it'd be easy. Most businesses will lose money for a period of time. And most of your business plans should show that, because you're spending a lot of money and you don't have a lot of sales, right? You're out there buying billboards, you are making products, you can't sell what you don't have in inventory. So you'll be making products, you'll be advertising, you'll be paying employees, right? Facebook has yet to make, well, it made money last year, but it didn't make money for the first 7 years of its life, right? Facebook. Why? It was spending a hell of a lot more than it was making because it was trying to get the word out, right? Uber is yet to become cash flow positive. They're spending a lot more money than they're making, but they're doing it for good purpose. Amazon, I think, has now once turned a profit in a quarter, right? And it started in 1995, right? Never made money. So how does it finance itself? Well, your financial plan should talk about that. What do we expect to sell? What are the costs to deliver that? What's my profit before and after tax? How are you going to finance yourself? Are you going to raise money from friends and family, which is extremely popular for small businesses? Will a local bank lend you money? There's a lot of federal agencies out there that support new business opportunities, because again, most people are employed by businesses that have less than 25 people in them. So the Small Business Association, SBA loans. So you go to Star Bank here locally, or you go to First Farmers, you go to Salin Bank, right, Barron Bank. You think about the local banks you have here, there are federal programs that will support you starting your business. And it's a way for the government to support local banks, to support local entrepreneurs. So think about what your business can support in terms of a capital structure. And then long term, if you are borrowing money, or you are taking investors, those investors are going to want to know what they're going to get for their money, right? And there's only two ways you can pay an investor back. Pay them a dividend, right? Or share price appreciation. If any of you bought stock, like you buy a share of Apple, there's only two ways Apple can pay you back as an investor for the risk you're taking. They can pay you a dividend, or the stock price can rise over time. right? So all the investors who are risking their capital on you, right? And a lot of that, again, is friends and family. You look at CIE in our business, we got about 50 investors, and most of those folks are local entrepreneurs, local investors, friends, family, to put that initial money together. And so we have a keen interest in seeing that those guys do well when we do well. And then lastly are appendices. These might be things that are supportive of something you state in your business description. So if you make a statement that this is a billion-dollar market and there is nobody locally providing this service, if there's a research report that you find online, that's the great thing about Google, right? You can go out and find a lot of research papers, a lot of work others have already done in a particular area to support your business plan. You may not want to show the entire thing, but you might want to take excerpts, almost like a bibliography for a book report you've done, and you might want to put that in the appendices, and you can then make reference to it in your business plan, right? And say, here's a statement of fact, and if you want more detail as a committee member, right, who's going to be judging your business plans, then go back and see Appendix 1A, right, or 2A to support the aspiration of the statement you're making for the product you are. So the executive summary, we talk about it here, keeping it short, 1 to 2 pages. Sometimes the business plan looks all executive summary and nothing everything else. I'd hope that you'd spend 1 or 2 pages on the executive summary again, then take each of your sections, whether it be your marketing plan, your financial plan, your advertising plan, and then just have a sentence or two that finds its way, or a paragraph or two that finds its way to the executive summary. Again, this is kind of like the 2-minute elevator speech. So if you've got the head of the local bank and you're going up an elevator and you've got 2 minutes and they say, hey, what are you doing right now? You've got 2 minutes, right, or less to try to explain to him or her what you're going to do, right? That's what your executive summary should be. It shouldn't be a very elaborate trying to convince people it's a good idea. It should be just the salient kind of highlights and just hit the high points. They talk about the killer pitch. I would say that if you can't describe your business in 1 or 2 sentences, then you're probably going to find yourself very, very thin and very wide as a team, right? So Uber is actually aspirationally a very broad idea, right? Kind of be all things to all people, distribution related. But they started very simply, right, in terms of 4 hire people to fill a need, which is, and it started in New York City, but you start where at certain times of the day you can't get a cab. And then people said, how do we go fill that need, right? And now Uber's become this idea that you can actually apply it like Amazon and stuff very, very broadly to many, many people. But it started as a very, very simple concept. You should have, even in your executive summary, usually in the first paragraph, it should be, we're a business to do X, right? And it should be somewhat catchy that people understand what you're about. The business description might be a little broader, and these are some great questions to help guide you in terms of what type of business is it going to be, why is it unique, who are our customers, right? So in the Care.com, if you think about Care.com, their customers are mothers. It's not me, right? It's usually the mothers is who they're catering to, and they want to know what's important to them in terms of background checks, age, experience, references. So you got to know who your customers are that you're going to try to cater to. Where will they be sold? If it is a physical product, are you going to sell these in kiosks? Are you going to only sell it online through eBay and through Amazon? Are you going to try to have physical presence in stores? Can you handle if you got a Walmart as a customer, and Walmart has X number of stores and they want you to fulfill this many widgets to all those stores? How much capital will that take? How much production, how much lead time? Will you make it here? Will you make it overseas? I mean, you start to ask one question and it'll kind of get extremely, extremely complicated quickly. The mission statement, again, defines kind of the goal of the business, right? And hopefully outlines what you hope to accomplish, right? What's the need that you're trying to fulfill? And again, it can be a little bit aspirational. That's why it says it should start with a 2. And some good examples they give you are like Starbucks. Now you think of Starbucks as a coffee company, right? But if you go to their website, and I would suggest you pick a couple companies that you frequent often. It could be Amazon, it could be Starbucks if you frequent that, and just spend a little bit of time going through their websites because they're very, very clear on who they are. But if you think about what they say is their mission statement. They say to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time. And what they did very simply was, there's a lot of people who serve coffee, right? But what Starbucks created was the first place that you can go and have an experience, a social experience, right, around coffee the way they used to do in Europe, right, over espresso or over a latte. But that's what they really wanted to do, was have it to be a place where you can meet. If you go to a Starbucks now, you'll find a lot of business actually gets transacted at a Starbucks. It has taken on a life of its own, right? There's a lot of free Wi-Fi hotspots. People are interviewing other candidates. You have financial advisors, insurance people are all meeting their clients, almost like an office away from the office, in a more casual setting where you can have a conversation over a coffee. It's a much more inviting place to do business. Vision statement is slightly different, right? So it says that the goals of the company are stated in the mission statement. Your vision statement describes what your business will ideally look like. So I think the best way to do it is to see the difference between a mission statement, which is kind of aspirational, versus a vision, which is very specific to what they're trying to accomplish. So here's Amazon's that says, you know, their vision is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. Build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online. So Amazon 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was really just another distribution channel, like Walmart, like a grocery store, like a mall. It was kind of an online supercenter for all things. But now, Amazon distribute books. They have their own technology. They've also issued their first phone. They're trying to create an ecosystem that controls you as a consumer and me to be a part where your life somewhat is concentrically built around Amazon and now their Prime service. Core values. So values is kind of your guidelines as a company. What do you stand for? You can go to CIE, we've got ours up now to kind of say what we stand for with our farmer partners, locally and with our back-end customers, but it should articulate the character qualities that are important to you. So you go to Coca-Cola, they talk about how, you know, they serve as a compass for our actions, is their core value. So they talk about leadership, collaboration, integrity, accountability, passion, diversity, and quality. And if you think about someone like Coca-Cola, you know, they're trying to be all things to all people, right? They've got very much a global brand, but they try to also have to distribute it locally, right? So distribute it in places like Indonesia, where they don't have really good refrigeration. So how do I distribute product with poor infrastructure, poor road systems, and lack of refrigeration, right? With a product which actually tastes better when it's refrigerated. Integrity, right? Be real, collaborative, leverage collective genius. Yes, there's the special recipe that is Coke, but there's a lot of people who don't, even to this day, have a lot of experience with Coke versus Pepsi versus their local drinks. And then quality. You know, some people say, do what you say what you do, is a kind of a cliche, but that falls in a lot of the quality aspirations. Competitive analysis. So this is where you have to basically choose what you're going to be good at and what you're not going to be good at. So people who say, I'm going to be the best of the best, right, are not being honest with themselves and their business plans. Think of a business plan a little bit like being a decathlete, right? You may not be the best sprinter, you may not be the best high jumper, you may not be the best long distance runner, right? But you are good enough at a collective of things that you can differentiate yourself from your competition. Somebody else might be the low-cost supplier, China or Mexico. You might be a better service-oriented person because you can just-in-time deliver close by. You might be, so think about locally grown produce, right? They could probably make it cheaper in China, but by the time they get it on a ship and get it over here, right, in terms of the quality you would experience at home in cooking, you might find that locally grown things, that's why a lot of restaurants are moving to more of a locally grown produce, because it's one way to differentiate themselves from somebody else who's just trying to have kind of the new cool vegetable, right? Broccolini was not on everyone's menu list 20 years ago until it became kind of a hot item on the West Coast, and then people try to find how they get broccolini close by. Your competitive analysis needs to cover off, these are, again, you don't have to have all of these, but pick the ones that are important to you. This talks about statistical and historical data. How fast is your industry growing, right? Who is the competition and who's delivering that service today? What's the nature of the industry you're in? How fast is it forecasted to grow? So in our industry, we watch gasoline consumption, we watch miles driven, right? We watch We watch proof gallons, or what they call wine gallons of alcohol being consumed. We look at consumer demand. You might look at government data, and you might look at whether government regulations influence your industry. You can Google a guy named Michael Porter. This will pop right up. So go to Google, type in Michael Porter, 5 forces, and hit images. And I think one great way to visually understand what this is about, he wrote a very famous book called Competition Strategy, The 5 Forces, and it talks about all the things that impact a business. So what impacts your business is probably your suppliers, your customers, your competitors, and the government. Those are all the different things that can affect your business, right? So if you are Uber, right, who's your competition? It's probably other taxi cab drivers today, right? Who are your customers? It's you and I and everybody else that's out there. But governments like France, like California, have come in and now said, you can't, unless you're licensed, a livery driver, they call it, you can't drive in our city, in our states, in our country for Uber unless you're licensed, right? That kind of throws that business model off kilter a little bit if you can't apply some of the competitive analysis to your business plans. Now, you might have a very simple business plan, right? You might be a green, I don't know who won last year, but you might be a green landscaper, and you might tout yourself as being sustainable and using different kinds of pesticides and weed killers and things like that. Well, government regulations affect you there too. What are the local regulations in the state of Indiana for applications of things that are not permitted? Who are your competition? Is that a growing industry, right? In some places like California, with the drought they're going through, they're moving away from grasses, right? Things that require water, because you get charged for water out there. They're moving more, like Arizona has, to more hardscaped landscapes. So know who your customer is and know who your competition is. Management team. You know, most people think about management teams as being who's going to run the business, but in many small businesses, your management team is also some of your primary investors. So it talks about here about ownership structure, internal management teams, external teams. You're all going to need third-party assistance, right? Not many of you are lawyers, as well as IT specialists, right, as well as accountants, and all of us require some external people. I have more lawyers than I care to count. I was with some this morning who help us every day. We deal with people like Vectren, who deliver natural gas to us. We deal with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, who enforces the Clean Air Act for our air permit. We have a water permit. We have OSHA standards. We have ERISA. We have all these different government bodies making sure we're doing what we should be doing for our employees, for our customers, and for our community. All of these folks here on your external advisory board might be people helpful to you. You might want to have a banker on your board. You might want to have a lawyer on your boards. People who can help advise you on basic things like contract law, right? When you're writing up a contract on leasing space for your Starbucks competitor. I know that was one of the plans last year, was a different kind of a coffee shop, right? A different kind of a social environment for a younger state, a younger group, a younger set of customers. Well, who's going to help you negotiate that first lease? It's the first lease you ever negotiated. You might want to have a lawyer on your advisory board. Human resources. Usually the last thing people think about, and the more I spend time in a private business, the more I would tell you, I think human resources is probably one of the more important functions that we have in companies, right? All of our employees, all of you, as you grow up, have choices. And if the company you're working for is not satisfying that, they're not paying you for the value you add, they're not engaging with you, they're not being responsive to you when it comes to health care, dental care, vision, etc., people will get up and leave. They'll get up and leave on the elevator every day, and they'll go work somewhere else. So human resources is a pretty big part of what you'll be doing as a business plan. And some of you will come up with a business plan that doesn't require any employees, right? You might just be a business by yourself, right? You might be an independent contractor, and that might be something that's kind of valuable. The question will be whether that's a business that can stand on its own. Is it scalable? Is that a business you can really grow if it's just based on you and your team? The reality is it's probably somewhat limiting on how much you can really accomplish. And then lastly, compensation. So we talked about financially, what your business is going to look like. So your key costs are going to be cost of goods sold, right? Overhead, sales and marketing are your 3 biggest components, right? So cost of goods sold, what's it cost to make your product? Overheads would be things like lights, electricities, utilities, lease, rent, and then people. So everybody who's in your organizational structure up there, in terms of HR heads, accounting heads, sales leaderships, right, regional people. I mean, you can think bigger, but all those people are expecting to get paid. They're all expecting to have healthcare benefits for them and their families, right, dental benefits. So that all kind of feeds into compensation. Development and production. Again, it depends on whether you have a good or a service and what goes into that, but you do need to go through a little bit of an explanation as to how you think you're going to build it. And sometimes outsourcing is not necessarily the right answer. I know a lot of business plan competitions, people say, that's okay, I'm going to go get it made, you know, in Vietnam, which is a very popular place right now because Mexico used to be the cheapest place to make things, then it was Puerto Rico, then it was China. It's actually now Vietnam, and now we're actually moving into some other areas where people are working for pennies per hour, sadly. But for them, it's a better wage than they can otherwise get. But there's a lot of people who are now starting to figure out that maybe outsourcing the manufacturing is not the best thing for them. So think about your business and think about whether it's possible to outsource a business or whether you should do it here. Most businesses that are outsourced are ones that are very labor intensive. If it's not labor intensive, our business is not labor intensive at CIE. We have 65 people. People represent less than 3% of my total cost structure. So I could outsource our entire business to China, but you're not going to save a lot of money, right? Our biggest cost is feedstocks. Corn and starch is 90% of my feedstock. So, and you can't really outsource that. That's why a lot of our facilities are built in the Corn Belt, because it's close to your primary cost. You need to explain how your product's going to be made, whether you make it locally or maybe you make it regionally. Is distribution important to you? Are you going to try to service just the local market here in Grant County, Grant and surrounding counties, or are you going to go out and try to satisfy the Indianapolis or Fort Wayne market, aspire to Chicago, or really have a region, or really go for the entire United States? Maybe that's part of your business plan, right? Start locally and grow from there. And then manufacturing, you know, these are also somewhat important. You may have a great idea, but you're also not engineers. You've never designed a product, you've never patented a product, you've never patented or trademarked a name. You're going to need some third-party help thinking about what's the most cost-effective way of making this. And then lastly, the layout of your facility, if you're going to make it yourself, how many units you're going to produce, and how you're going to maintain quality. All things that you'll have to get into about making a product that is consistent, right? One of the things that you think about when you think about McDonald's is that you can eat a Big Mac in California, Indiana, or New York. And it's going to be kind of the same sandwich, right? That's part of the experience that McDonald's builds upon, is the consistency of that quality, of how stores look, of how products are made, and how they taste. You'll want to make sure that your customers experience the same thing. So if you're Care.com and you're really just hiring part-time people to watch kids, even though they're all different, right? There should be some things that are consistent and similar about them in terms of their ability to understand how to handle crisis situations, right? Pediatric CPR, right? Staying calm, understand how to handle and hold an infant, right? There's still a lot of skills, even in those jobs, that should be consistent across your service business. Marketing plan. We talked about a written strategy. So a lot of people think marketing is just about advertising, but a lot of it has to do with understanding your marketplace, right? Hence the root word market. Understand your market first. So who's your customer and what's their profile, the demographics, what kind of price can they afford for your product? A lot of people have a phenomenal idea, but it can't be produced cost effectively. It can't be delivered at a price that makes sense, and therefore things fall apart. You guys probably don't remember the World Phone, but once upon a time there was this big phone before there was the neat little cool iPhone that people would, when they went globally and traveled, and the thing was literally bigger than this Casio keyboard set, because back then they didn't have the componentry to make something cost effective in a size that made sense for all of us to, you know. So go back and watch, I think it was Lethal Weapon, and you can see the car phone that they pull out, and that was in the 80s. So make sure that you understand your target market, how you'll price your product. And one of the ways to know what your price is, if you've got competition, go online and see what they charge for their products, right? If you're going to be in the coffee business, go figure out what a latte costs at Starbucks and see if you can deliver that cost of coffee the same or better. And what you'll find is it depends on how many cups of coffee you sell. because you have a lot of costs that are fixed and some costs that are variable. And we'll talk about that in the financing section. But you need to figure out whether your price will be competitive in the marketplace, how you'll get that product out to your customers, and lastly, how you're going to advertise and promote it. What couponing will you do? What advertising will you do? The 4 P's of most marketing plans will hit on these topics, right? Product, price, place, promotion. So, what's your product? How are you going to price it? Where will you sell it? And how will you promote it? So come back to those 4. If you answer those 4, you've got a solid marketing plan. Financially speaking, many of you have not spent a lot of time around an income statement, a balance sheet, a cash flow statement, but you've all had experience with it, right? Most people are what are called cash basis accountants, right? You get handed an allowance. At the end of the week, you either have money or you don't have money, right? And what you spend are your expenses. What you kept at the end of the week is your cash flow. What you were given is your revenue. So you've all had some experience, whether you know it or not, with basic accounting, right? You've all had to put together budgets for yourself, right? For prom, for a party, for whatever it is, you kind of know and you've been through what are the key parts. Now we're just going to kind of apply it in a business setting. So these are the parts you need to kind of include in terms of your costs. Will be mostly your utilities, your salaries, we talked about this, your communications. So you guys might need computers, IT systems, maintenance and marketing. What we didn't talk about here was the revenue side. So you need to kind of be, again, realistic about how much you're going to sell year 1, right? Most people in their business plans will say, I'm going to make this widget, and in the first month we're going to sell 100,000 of them. Right? And I guarantee you in the first month you're going to sell 0, because in the first month you're probably making them. And in month 2 you're going to start marketing it, right? And month 3 you're going to start giving them away to get some buzz and some stuff going, right? It may be a product that you would give out to your high school classmates, right? Because things like Facebook and social media have a way of taking over once you have a product that people actually like and desire. But you're still paying your employees. You're still paying your utility bills. You're still paying your lease, right, on your coffee shop or on your manufacturing facility. And you're going to end up with a lot of expenses in those first few months, and you're going to be losing money. That's okay. Most businesses lose money. You just got to make sure that you raise enough money to cover those costs. It's what's called your burn rate. While you burn through money, while you build a brand, while you build a business, you build a manufacturing facility, you hire your people, right? You get your offices set up, you buy your computers. And then the question will be in your business plan, how long will it take before you break even? How many widgets do you need to sell? How many babysitting duties do you need to do? How many rides do you have to provide? How many cups of coffee do you have to sell before you start to break even, right? We do the same thing in terms of how many gallons we have to sell of alcohol before we start to cover our costs. How many more do we have to sell before we start making a profit? How many more do we have to sell before we start making our budget and we start making our bank covenants? And lastly, are your appendices. Again, news articles, industry data, surveys from customers. It's okay if you got an idea to go talk to some of your classmates and say, I got 5 questions that are important. You know, where do you buy your pencils? Why do you buy them there? Does price matter? Does color matter? I mean, think about what's important to your product and go out and take some surveys from people, including your parents, families, and friends. Polish never hurts, right? This is the old phrase, substance over form. I would tell you to focus on the substance first, right? If you've got a good idea, a good business plan, each of you have contributed. It may not be perfect, right? But having a good substance matters most. But give yourself time. So I'd say set deadlines for yourself as a team that are well inside of when things are due. Give yourself time to react, because again, you may have an idea that changes halfway through. So set early deadlines for yourself, and that will also give you plenty of ample time to do some of the polish, right? Put together a nice table of contents, a title page, a cover page, and you'll find a lot of typos the third time you read something than the first time. Any questions that you might have? There's a lot to take in 35 minutes. Have you guys started thinking about ideas yet for your businesses? No? No? 0? No ideas? Okay. Well, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Let's give steps that can help you start kind of outlining and getting an idea of what exactly your business is going to look like. So it's after the PowerPoint, I think, in your binders. And you can fill that out as a team and turn it in next week, or you can do it on like a Word document and put it to the Google Doc. Whatever works best for you guys. Try and get that done by next week. The videos, if anyone wasn't here, they want to see the videos, those hopefully will be posted this week sometime. Charity, where can they access that?
I'm sorry?
Where can they access the videos?
It'll be through YouTube, so we'll send them a link.
So be on the lookout for the link, and one more thing. I don't remember. Oh yes, respond to that email, make sure that's all, if you haven't gotten that account, make sure that works, and come back next week and bring the rest of your team. Attendance is really cool. Thank you guys.